Welcome, everybody, to another broadcast of The Soul of the Everyman on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. All past shows are available in podcast form. You can find them at ArtistFirst.com. Want to make a comment on the show? Hit us up at DJ@ArtistFirst.com. And here they are, your hosts, a couple of truly amazing people, Michael and Margaret Lyons.
It's truly not true. Well, this is not me. This is my me.
Oh.
So this is Mike.
Well, I'm Margaret, regardless of what he says.
Right. She's regardless of what I say. And I am being irregarded.
Or E-regarded.
I'm being E-regarded. It's like being Beauregarded, except with an E. Well, and all of us, all you people out there, all you E people are listening to us, and that's part of our topic this evening. One thing we can say right off the bat is that what we're doing, even though we are delivering it via various means, this kind of conversation we're having, I would still count in the realm of a human-to-human contact. First of all, we are having a conversation. The two of us are talking with each other, and you people can't see this, but we can hear each other directly. We're in the same room. Sometimes we're touching. Too much information. Anyway, but we're having a human conversation, and when we started this whole thing, 2.5 years ago, when we took this fateful plunge and started doing this, one of the reasons that we did it is that many years ago, Margaret and I, or rather Margaret used to own a store, and that store sold rocks and gems and jewelry and all sorts of things, but it didn't really matter. What the interesting thing about it was that we would both work there, and we would, in the normal course of serving the customers that we would get into interesting conversations, sometimes between the two of us, sometimes between either of us and one or more of our customers. And what we would note is that other people in the store, sometimes many other people in the store, would really stop what they were doing or stop pretending to do what they were doing and listen in to our conversations, because the topics weren't, how much is that? Well, that's $9.95. No, it was a little bit more than that. It was like $10.95. So we would have these these conversations with people. Sometimes we'd have great conversations with the kids, because this was the kind of store that kids would come in, and it was a destination place for them. They would come in, they would get to see and play with all the interesting things we had in there. There were things for every budget. There were things you could buy for a penny and things you could buy for 2 pennies. And so these this I would postulate also honed our skills in both talking to each other, and also talking to the public. So where was I going with all this? It was still a human-to-human kind of interaction. What we're doing here is very similar. We're having a conversation, and others, all you hundreds of millions of people out there, or 3 of you, however many there are listening in. So it's still in the realm of a human experience.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's something that you wind up doing as a small child anyway, because you would listen to the adult conversation. And sometimes you could make sense of it, and sometimes you couldn't. But it was interesting in that effect, because you're just like, oh, I didn't know that. And we grew up in the age where children were meant to be seen and not heard.
Mm.
At least that was in my house.
Right.
So if you had a question, you had to wait until after the adults were finished with their conversation. But it was always an interesting way to figure out what certain things meant and how certain people looked at this thing, or if there was a situation, how your parents were looking at this situation. Who was stressing, who wasn't stressing, who was problem solving, who was just taking things apart. Fascinating, really. It's something that we're born into, frankly. We're always wanting to listen in on something.
Right, but to our premise, and I don't know if we've explained our premise very well, but at this point, what we're going to say was that, in our current sort of, let's say, the Internet of everything age that we live in, that ability to have sort of this human conversation or human contact or human connection has been kind of we put a whole bunch of layers in between. Like now, if you actually pick up the phone and you actually call someone and lay your voice electronically in their ear, people are like, is there something wrong? Couldn't you have texted, emailed, Snapchatted, this chat, that chat, the other chat, any other of a million other things? If you're calling me, someone's dead. If the phone rings now, it means that Armageddon is happening, and someone's actually going to tell you it on words in your ear. And if God forbid someone comes to visit you, it must mean that the world has come to an end. People are coming in our front door. and when I grew up, I know you grew up more in the city, but where I grew up, we spent our whole, especially this time of year, it's summertime, you spend your whole day going to other people's houses without even inviting, without a plan. You just they're like a Philistine. You knocked on their door and they opened it and they said hi. And like, what? You let them in without an appointment? Unknown children from who knows where? They're in the living room? So, that's the reaction today. But at that time, we literally just walked in other people's houses and sat down, and they used to give us a drink once in a while. It was great. If they were having dinner, they would invite you to eat, and you'd say, no, my mom doesn't want me to do that. And then you'd go home.
Right. It's true. It's true.
That seems almost... it seems like something from a bygone age, but it wasn't. It was like 1970, It's like...
you would have the one room that you could entertain guests in. It would always be really clean and in place. Nobody was allowed to play in that, just in case the guests came over. Someone came dropping by. It wasn't... And
dropping by?
Yes.
Unannounced, like strangers on your doorstep that you don't have to shoot at.
Well, that was the thing, though. You had your living room or the family. This is the place where we entertained the guests. And then there was, they always had a little something, just in case a guest came over, a little something to serve. You never touched that.
Right. That was there for like years. It's like guest food.
This is for the guests.
This is for the guests.
Until it was getting a little... So, all right, we'll eat that. I'll get something else.
Now you can have it.
Now
it's old enough and stale enough so we can feed it to the children. But it's funny, but it's the absolute truth. You as a human being were perfectly comfortable presenting yourself in person on some other human being's porch and just casually knocking on the door and saying, "Hey, is Johnny on? I want to come and play." And they'd say, "Sure." And you'd walk in and you'd play with Johnny. And, if Johnny wasn't home, they'd say, "No, he's over at Stevie's." And you'd just go there. And pretty soon, if you had a nice, if you had a house that was conducive to this, you'd have the whole neighborhood in your freaking living room doing whatever. And, Mom would say, "Well, don't, break a window or kill anybody." And that'd be about it. Or go outside, you're making too much noise. And then we'd all just pile outside. So,
Oh, dear. Are you okay?
See, the reminiscences are killing me.
Oh, dear. Oh,
wow.
my.
They're gonna have to bleep that out.
Take a breath. Take a breath.
I think that was the problem. I took a breath at the wrong moment. The in the current way we're doing things, we have really layered ourselves and wrapped ourselves up in kind of avatar after avatar after avatar, and some of it is, almost sort of forced upon you. You can't do business in the current world the way we were doing business before. I think people are just not ready to interact at that level. But I think we've gone so far away that now when you do something normal, like wave to somebody on the street, they give you a look like, do I owe you money? Are you going to physically interact with me because I'm armed? So I think our humanity is suffering, and the more you separate from people, one of the things that there's the old saying that familiarity breeds contempt, and that is true, but actually unfamiliarity breeds fear.
Right.
When you have never extended yourself to meet someone and kind of familiarize yourself, and the root word of familiarize is the same as the root word of family, the familia. When you become part of a group or part of an association of people, you are recognized, you are familiar, and you're also not only are you not a stranger, but you're not strange. You're not a threat. You're a known quantity. Oh, there's just one of the neighborhood kids. Let him in. Give him a corn dog. It'll be fine. But if you're now, everybody's a stranger, and everybody's somebody you never met before. Even the people next door, you've never met them. You've never had them inside your house. You've never, had their kids over except under extremely structured. We're going to have a play date from 3:27 to 4:05 because at 4:07 I have a call, and I can't be feeding children at that. So, we have a very, very, very structured, or we're all going to go, on a destination birthday party to someplace for 27 minutes and then leave, and we'll just go. Don't talk, don't make eye contact. So it's very dehumanizing.
Yes, and it's interesting because you're looking at the interactions. I mean, humans in general, you want to be able to make conversation, to talk, to just have that casual byplay. And we're all instructed on how to, or I think we're all instructed on how to have.
I think we used to be instructed on how to meet strangers. How to introduce yourself. And I don't think that's necessarily. I think that art is another thing, Margaret, that's also getting lost.
No, I remember that being taught that as a small child. You say hello, you extend your hand, type a handshake.
Look them in the eye, and you're polite.
You are polite, and there were certain rules, like you don't ask for seconds. You never take anything from...
You don't ask for seconds. If you asked for seconds, there was a death penalty. If you're offered seconds, you can't refuse them. That's the other part. Okay, but you can't ask.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Well, exactly. No, if they offer it, you take the one that's nearest to you.
Right. You're right. You're so right. There were all those rules. I've forgotten them. Don't reach across the plate. Take the one that's nearest to you.
Yes.
Let it burn. Eat it.
Oh my, yeah. Just you weren't supposed to. Your reach. You never reach across someone's field of vision. There was all sorts of even sitting at the table, you never really touched your plate until Mom sat down.
Well, within the family, but when you would have these...
No, I'm saying guests. If you were invited...
Oh, guests, exactly, right. Until their mom sat down.
Until their mom was to sit down, you didn't stuff any food in your mouth. Right. Because you were being polite. Because, this is her food. It's not your food.
Right. But there was so there were these defined periods. If you were meeting someone for the first time, you had certain things. There was these protocols, which you learned how to meet. It's like there's a 101 how to meet people, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you became a little more familiar, the rules got a little more relaxed, and you could do different things. And you would also get to the point where you would be totally accepted in a variety of households up and down your neighborhood. So you could really literally walk right in, sit down, and just have an uninvited, always welcome, you know. That level of human interaction builds community. It builds familiarity. It builds trust in and amongst a society. And when you take it away, you get a society which is really living in communal isolation.
Mm-hmm. Well, you were being taught that this family has a certain way of looking at things, and you're not always sure exactly how what you're saying or what was being done is going to be translated. So for them, you know, to bring this particular thing over reminds me of, what was that, My Big Fat Greek Wedding, when the fiance's mother brought the bundt cake and it had a hole in it, and they were horrified that this cake had a hole in it.
Right.
You know, so they tried to make it lovely by putting a flower pot in there. It was just,
right.
it's absurd stuff, but it's fun actually, because you try to blend your understandings together.
Right. But again, it's very human contact, right?
Very human contact, and you basically, you tried very hard not to take offense to anything, because you realized that this is a completely different culture, and there was no animosity or no nastiness that was trying to be communicated. You were just trying to understand what this other person means by such and such, or you know, when our Chinese friends that came straight out from mainland China over here and trying to understand, why do Americans do this? Like the wedding, they don't have that. The whole rigmarole with the wedding, they find that a complete mystery.
Well, but I want to abstract what you just said. There's two or three things there. Basically, what we were doing was always giving the other the benefit of the doubt, and not even the benefit of the doubt, but the assumption that they were trying to do something good, because there was a unwritten sort of code of if you were unfamiliar with someone, you just assume that nothing they were trying to do was something inimical. It was something bad. It was something good that you just didn't understand, you know, and then you had to kind of give them the benefit of the doubt and kind of figure each other out a little bit. So there was a goodwill assumption, and that came from this idea of community. You know, we're all human beings. We're a little different, like we have the bundt cake and all that. But I think now, if you come fast forward to 2019, because we're in this kind of insular, scheduled and avatared and layered, so that people appearing on your front porch with a bundt cake would be, akin to Visigoths at the gate.
You mean a welcome to the neighborhood
A
thing?
welcome to the neighborhood. It's a funny joke anymore. They were on my deck with a cake. What was I going to do? I had to, call the fire department. It becomes this, instead of the assumption that people are here to do good and we just don't understand, but we're going to give them the benefit, it's the complete opposite. It's there. If someone appears in your personal space, knocking on your door, the instant assumption is that there's a threat that I have to reject, deflect, and defend against. The instant assumption is that they're here to do something bad, and it really turns us into sort of a society of suspicion and mistrust, and that everybody's motives are always written to the lowest possible. They're here to put something over on me. They're here to try and get something from me. They're here to put, to
Well,
do something bad to me.
it's the old just in case, with all those video cameras at the door, and you attach to the phone, and they're constantly recording who's going by. It's the assumption that someone may be trying to get something from you. Now, it is a machine and a tool that you use to be able to figure out whether or not there's a real problem. But I think, in truth, if someone really wanted to do something to your house, that's not going to do anything.
Right. And in fact, I'm just saying, before, let's say, when we were growing up, back in the old days, back when we were growing up, people would appear on your front door, and you would open the door and you would greet them. They might be Jehovah's Witnesses, they might be selling something door to door, whatever, but you would have that sort of human interaction, and you might waste a little bit of your time, but you would politely greet them. You would hear their spiel, and you would send them on their way. And they knew, in essence, that they were counting on your hospitality and weren't going to wear it out.
Okay, I'm going to say this is mostly a burb thing. You realize that, right?
Oh yeah, it's not a city thing. I agree.
No, it's not city, nor is it real country. Because out here, if you're coming out here, and someone had said to me, you got to watch, because out in the boonies they'll come out with a shotgun.
Well, certainly there was a recognition of familiarity that would be a stranger, somebody who you weren't expecting to come over. But if your neighbor, even somebody you'd only casually seen in town, showed up in your front door, you would greet them in such a way that it was a human to human interaction. I think now that would be viewed much more suspiciously, even if you've seen these people on a regular basis. The idea that they would come to your house would be somehow completely fantastic and crazy, strange. What are you doing here? I wasn't expecting you.
I wasn't expecting you.
Right.
In fact, it was someone who was working for UPS had said, the minute you wear that uniform, everybody just opens the door for you.
Well, that's another thing. Is we give our trust away to a uniform,
right?
Or to
It's the same thing, only in reverse. It's like,
yeah.
Oh, okay, it's the UPS man, no problem. Open the door. What do you have?
Right.
Welcome, and in
welcome.
They come.
So we can have the human interaction with the UPS man. So that's all you have to do. That's the solution. You just have to dress all the kids up in UPS uniforms, and everyone will open the door and invite them into the living room and give them cake and cookies. And some traditions have survived even the internet age. So Halloween is a great one. That one night we all go back to everyone coming up on the porch is treated like a human being. Oh, what a wonderful costume, and you want some candy, and we'll have a little interaction. And it becomes, at least we have something like that still kind of owns our humanity. Because you don't know who the heck is coming up on your porch, but you open your door and you say, "Hey, how you doing?"
Oh, it's expected.
Yes.
It's expected, and that is how do I say this?
It's like license.
Gives permission for people to say, because everyone's doing it, and it's in a neighborhood usually that you're familiar with.
Right, but you don't really know who's coming up, and you put yourself on your best behavior. You're polite. You expect those who are coming are also going to be polite and not, trash your house or do whatever the heck it is, mess up your garden, your bushes, and it's a good exercise of the human contract, of the I'll be nice to you if you be nice to me kind of thing that used to be kind of everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. But if you, let's go back a little bit,
Okay.
because we went off on a tangent.
No.
All right. The human connection is vitally important. And as we mature through childhood, you expect to be taught what is appropriate and what isn't in this interconnection. Now that we've got internet, as a parent, you have to be more vigilant because you have access to almost anything on the internet. So thus, screen time. It's only so much screen time that a child is allowed to have. And they're allowed to have phones earlier and earlier. So it becomes very important to be able to teach a little one how to be able to guard against stuff at an early age.
Right.
I don't think that that's something that people have really focused on, because it's a distraction not just for the child but also for the parent. You have to balance the whole thing. And the kid's looking to you to see how you balance what you're doing with your phone to how this is supposed to be handled.
Well, the earlier part of that is, I think, exactly correct, is that, and the latter half is correct too, but I just wanted to focus on the first part, is that idea of, one of the ideas that powered the old kind of I'll walk up on your porch was that there was a limited community, and that you gave this sort of implied license because you knew that people from 10,000 miles away weren't going to walk up on your porch because you were 10,000 miles away, or even the next town over. It was unlikely. But you're right. Now, one of the reasons that we guard ourselves so much more and give ourselves so many more layers is that you really are touching the entire world potentially through this tiny device. And so there is more unknowns that are out there than knowns anymore. And unknowns always engender caution. So that idea of having to be cautious and guard, and as you say, younger and younger and younger, we're starting to strip away these layers of innocence, these layers of innocence over children that, your parents would be the people you would interact with until you were 40. And then...
And information, it's right there. All you have to do is ask. And it's,
now, yeah.
Yes, it's right there. Before, you really had to go digging to get your information. And that was a little more controlled. Now there's so much that comes at you that you have to be able to discern what it is that you need and what to ignore and what to basically say, well, no, that's not true.
Right.
Because at that point, your reality becomes manipulated, and what is real and what is not. So therefore, we have our present problem with the media.
Oh, well, but really, writ large, the present degree of suspicion of contact, and human contact has been kind of lumped into all contact. This idea that everybody is potentially bad, if you will. And speaking of potentially bad things, or good things, let's go back to the studio, have a little break, have some potentially wonderful things, then we'll come back in a couple minutes.
The Fat Man Gets Out of Bed is the latest book from Michael Lyons, the award-winning author of There is a Reaper. Featuring 13 original stories, this wide-ranging collection has everything. Forbidden love, gods versus demigods, weird invading aliens, sexy seductive artificial intelligence, and unusual passion between the living and the dead. All set amidst fantastic worlds of pain and loss and boundless joy. From the sublime to the macabre to the bittersweet, The Fat Man Gets Out of Bed will leave you breathless with laughter, brimming with tears, trembling with suspense. Available now on Amazon.com, Google Play, iTunes, Kobo, and fine e-tailers everywhere.
The Timeless Esoterica radio program with Dr. Bruce is broadcast on the fourth Monday of every month at 8 p.m. Pacific, 11 p.m. Eastern, on ArtistFirst.com. We explore topics including the paranormal, alien life, mysteries, conspiracies, hidden history, oddities, and much more. Each show will feature a special guest with exciting and thought-provoking discussion. Always keep an open mind, an open heart, live forever, and remember Dr. Bruce believes in you.
Rick Riordan fans, love mythology with plenty of action and humor? Destroyer's Blood is for you. The new fantasy novel by award-winning author Michael Lyons is book one of the adventures of Dev Kalian, the Blood series. Follow Dev and his magic sword Betrayer as they are suddenly attacked and forced to return to Olympus to fight in a war they want no part in. The world of men and gods is about to be destroyed by Zeus's ancient foe, and only Dev and Trey can stop him. The conflict never stops, and the amazing twist will have you on the edge of your seat. Act now while the ebook is on sale for only 99 cents. Destroyer's Blood is available on Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, Kobo, and fine e-tailers everywhere. And while you're there, get the free prequel, It's in the Blood, available for a limited time.
Hi, this is Minette Lauren, author of Race for the Sun. Do you believe in guardian angels? Check out book one of my Soul Watcher series. It can be found on Amazon.com or anywhere fine books are sold. Go to www.minettelauren.com, and you are listening to the ArtistFirst Radio Network.
There is a Reaper is the story of 5-year-old Christopher Aaron and his life-changing struggle with leukemia. Winner of both the Indie Bragg Medallion as well as the reader's favorite silver medal for memoir, There is a Reaper has more than 100 Amazon book reviews and a 5-star rating. It has been described as life-changing, spiritual, a must-read. Just released on Audible and iTunes, this memoir is also available in paperback and on Amazon Kindle for only 99 cents. Get your copy of this life-changing memoir today.
You are listening to The Soul of the Everyman on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. Let's get back to them. Michael and Margaret Lyons.
This is my me. Well, and this welcome to the Soul of the Everyman, the second half of the hour, and we've been talking tonight about sort of the importance of the human connection and how I guess it's really changed, because we still have human connections even in the current age, and once you get past all the avatars and all the barriers, and you find that people are people and still are, to this day, able to have wonderful, significant relationships and able to be polite to strangers and all the other sorts of things that we used to do. I just think that maybe the hurdles we've set up kind of to get to us have gotten higher, and maybe they have to be. There is certainly some sense in being more guarded with yourself when the stakes are higher and the amount of trouble that certainly young children can get into is more serious, and they can get into it much more easily, as you mentioned last half hour. it's right there. It isn't that you have to go seeking trouble. It'll seek you, and it'll lure. There's a component of luring the innocent into these kinds of negative situations, if you will. So you can certainly see that having this incredible resource also requires, like anything, vigilant management. It's the old genie in the bottle or Pandora's box. Once you've opened it, once you've opened the big box that says internet, you can't close it. It's here, and we have to live in the world we have today. So you can reminisce all you want about them good old days, but they're gone. And we can still have good nowadays, as long as we still try to maintain ourselves even under the onslaught, under this larger umbrella of huge amounts of information, and then necessarily huge amounts of risk.
True. It's just that the ways of thinking on your approach is the interactions from one person to another are usually face-to-face, and there is a certain protocol that way. You learn to feel each other out. If this person is familiar with the typical greeting, or does it need to be modified? On the screen, you have to almost bring a whole different mindset on the screen, whether it is your phone or your computer. And if someone is reaching out to interact with you, it's got to go through that screen, what would you call it, a filter, in order to say, okay, this is clear for a regular conversation. And yeah, you do have to be more vigilant because, as you said, the range of people that are capable of making contact with you, and they're not familiar. They're not from your neighborhood. They're from different places. And there've been plenty of stories that we've had where people are getting involved in internet scams and internet raising money for other people, supposedly. Just, can I draw you in? Is there a way for me to convince you that you need to part with some money or something?
Right. Information.
Yeah, information especially.
Influence.
So it creates a whole different protective face layer. Because you know that once you hit the internet, it really isn't not as safe as you once thought it was.
Well, that's true.
Okay, when it first started, people weren't doing stuff like this. It was just brand new, and the technology was developing. But then someone figured out that, hey, I can do a few things so that I'm behind a name somewhere, and I can get something out of it if I do this.
Right. And none of these things are unknown to human nature, because we are ourselves, whether we're on the internet or whether we're interacting face to face. There certainly were scams, going back as far back as the human being is the human being. I think what it comes down to is what you said before, is that the opportunities for folks who want to do something are so much easier. The barriers are so much lower. If you wanted to defraud somebody, it was a lot harder. If you had to do it face to face, there had to be things that were easily testable. Now you can kind of create these personas out of thin air, with a snap of a finger, literal, not figurative, not literal, snap of the finger, and then all of a sudden you're someone else. And if that person gets discovered as being a fraud, well, then you're just someone else, and you're someone else. And so this idea of the how facilely this medium can be used to conceal and potentially to, as you said, lure people in, draw people in, it's become sort of this arms race between what you have to do to defend yourself, guard your information, guard your appearance, guard your access against those who much more easily can find out about you and access your information and have more opportunity to lure you in. So even though it looks very safe, the looks are deceiving, and it's been a sort of a school of hard knocks. As one thing we can say, Margaret, is that you and I have seen the transition. And the generations before us, our parents and so on, have seen this transition unfold really beneath our feet. It was a complete sea change. So we're at a point where things are changing dramatically. It's one of those wave changes through a society. Kids who are born today are never going to have that experience. Their world is the world we have right now. And going forward, things may go different again, but they're taking as the status quo, as the normal, the things that we're saying are the big change. Prior, when we're talking about generations before this kind of sea change in society, things moved slower, much more slowly. You had just... you could have taken your manners that were drilled into you by your mom or by your school teacher and probably applied those same principles to the 18th century or the 19th century and been just fine. You might have been not polite enough, but you would have been able to get by, because those same kinds of ways of human interaction go all the way back several hundred years of, let's say, quote-unquote, modern society, starting from, let's say, the 1700s. Technology wasn't there, but certainly writing letters and greeting people and being, going from town to town or whatever you were doing, all that happened. So that those societal norms could carry you right along, but then we hit this wall, and there was like a step function, a sea change. We had to go from things that we knew how to do as a society into a world where those things didn't really work all that well anymore. And to the extent that you could take advantage of this, you could take advantage of people. And to the extent that you weren't aware of what could happen, you could be taken advantage of. So it's been a kind of a steep change for us and for people maybe a little bit younger than us, but not for the kids today. It's no change. Just is.
True. But it also means that unless they are taught what the value system, any kind of value system is, they are vulnerable.
Yeah.
Well, everybody does that. No, that doesn't, everybody meaning who? The ones that you thought you knew? No. It becomes more important to be able to allow ways or teach ways where a person will know whether or not something is true to them and true in their heart. In other words, to live a life where you don't have these huge regrets about your decisions.
Mm.
Because when you're young, you have no regrets. Normally speaking, you haven't made enough decisions to make that big of an impact on your life. Now, and you are so vulnerable because you really don't know. And when you're young, that's usually when you learn to explore.
Right.
You're expected to make mistakes when you're young. But the way things are now, especially when it comes to drugs or alcohol, that decision will impact you harder than it had when we were young. Mm-hmm. I know for a fact that a number of things like the marijuana that they're creating now is far more potent than it had been when we were young, so that you're hooked on that first hit.
Certainly, physical, those kinds of physical interactions, and then you were saying the skills that you need to navigate this particular type of world have to be taught younger and taught much more differently. Almost learned, that idea of innocently exploring your internet world is almost impossible, because unless you really wall it off, and there are some things that allow you to do that, there's a steep cliff there. It isn't a gradual, to use an analogy, you're not gradually walking out deeper and deeper and eventually you swim and it gets a little colder, and no, it's you're in your wading pool, and then if you step over the side, you're in the ocean. There's a huge drop off. And so let's say the skills that they're learning today are necessary and important to deal with that sort of very, very steep learning curve, very quick learning curve. But I think the skills that they're not learning today, the fact that everything is so structured and that is so, kind of guarded, it means that if you took the internet age kid who knew nothing but, and put them, figuratively somehow back into the situation of the 19th century, their way of interacting with people just doesn't work. Nor does it work the other way very easily. What I'm trying to say is we've closed a door or crossed a barrier which is difficult to go back to the previous one. In other words, we're losing some skills because of where we are over here, human interaction skills. We're gaining other ones that don't apply back here.
What do you do?
Well, I'm trying to say is that a society has gone through a sort of a irreversible change here. Something you could prior generations have had to, and the one that had to live through it had to learn all this stuff, but prior generations wouldn't understand the protocol that's being used here and has to be used here. Similarly, if you were able to take those skills back, it wouldn't apply here anymore. And that wasn't true for a very long period of time. So the point I'm trying to make is that type of societal change, it becomes a significant inflection point in the development of a culture that you can't necessarily go back through again. You've lost something and you've gained something, and the two don't live well together anymore. You can certainly say, if I know how to drive a car, I could probably drive a horse cart, or I could probably figure out how to drive some of the earlier technology. But if you go past the point where self-driving cars come in and nobody knows how to drive a car anymore, let's say, and then you try to push them back into an era where you have to guide something with your will and your eyes and your skills, and be like, I don't do that. It does it itself. You just tell it to go, and it goes. The skill you've crossed, a real barrier that you can't go back through anymore. So I'm just saying that's a societal change that we're living through right now. This interesting times kind of stuff.
Okay, so it's just this is an observation.
Well, that goes back to our sort of theme. Trying to maintain the human connection, even though we're going through a societal change. We're still people on both sides, but the skill sets are changing radically.
Well, I think a problem arises when someone wants to do a judgment call on someone who doesn't have either skill set.
True. But I'm not really looking to judge. I'm really looking to observe.
That is part of the observation. You see the reaction that people have. Now, reactions are harder to become aware of because people just go in it. And because we are taking steps in an internet kind of deal where there is an e-connection, you have to become more aware of what your internal state is, because without that awareness, you will be manipulated into states, different states, that because you're triggered, you've already handed over that reaction to someone. You allow yourself to be triggered that way instead of being aware that you are being triggered and that now you need to remove that trigger point. So what you're seeing, because you see a vast number of things on your screens these days, I would personally believe that learning how to hold your presence and become non-reactive is the next step, because you're being inundated constantly by images and stories and people. And not to be triggered. Non-reactive means that you won't be triggered into something. That's the next step. Can you hold your awareness while seeing all the madness that's being flashed in front of you, and not be your internal state, not be manipulated one way or another.
Steered.
To know when you're being manipulated and to know that you have to hold true to who you are. It's become more important, vitally important, to be able to hold that. Otherwise, you just become a reaction.
So what you're saying is that because the significance of center and heart discernment becomes more important because of the severity or the strength of the triggers or the events and all the things that are coming at you so much higher. So before you might have to run into people that you needed to be discerning with and guarded with, but it was at a much slower pace.
The main thing I keep hearing is, "Oh, I'm overwhelmed by that." Why are you overwhelmed? And it's usually because you're being triggered into reaction after reaction after reaction, that you get to the point where you can't think.
Yeah.
And that needs to be addressed. You need to be at a point where that's not there anymore.
So would you postulate that the kids for whom this is normal are going to have to learn that skill?
Yeah. And it's difficult because what you need is a very strong sense of self in terms of not well, I like this and I don't like that kind of thing. It's who you are as a human being and your capabilities and the gifts that were given to you. Those are precious. And there are things out there that want to take that from you.
So you're saying a stronger sense of heart identity is going to be, key, but it's also going to be required.
Yeah, it is. It is something that needs to, as parents, this is where the next step is, to teach them. It becomes vitally important your early years, because when you learn in those early years, it's foundational. It's very hard to figure a way to get around something that you were taught when you were young.
I'm going to say that I find that terribly encouraging. Yeah, I actually find, because what I was saying before maybe ineptly before, was that our society has gone through sort of an irreversible change. A Pandora's box type of open. We can't put it back in the box. So even though it may look like chaos now, what we're saying right now is that the people for whom this is normal, not chaos, but status quo, this is how the world is, are going to have to perforce develop a greater sense of who they are in that society. And I think maybe that's a good thing. It's an evolutionary thing.
Well, this is why I feel that the millennials are very misunderstood.
Yeah.
Because they're not functioning the old way, which is where most people want to be able to judge. They understand what's going on, and they accuse the millennials of being very selfish. But the truth of the matter is, there is a core understanding that unless you have that sense of who you are, you will be manipulated, and they know that what they put their eyes on is very precious.
Mm.
When they're young, we have said this before, on the screen, there will be things coming in that you just didn't want to see, all these advertisements that come in, etc., and they're vying for your attention.
Right.
So the millennials know that their attention is very important, but in order to survive, they're going to have to focus on themselves first to be able to begin to know their core. They yearn for core. What I found is whenever a millennial comes across someone who's living at their core, that frequency that's really pure, they pay more attention.
Right.
And they won't listen to anyone unless they see that connection is there.
It's very encouraging, and I think you've come exactly to the right point here. Is that these people, the people who are the next generation, who will be running the world, whether we like it or not, are going to have to know themselves very well and have a real good sense of core, and that's it's very encouraging.
No, I have faith in the human spirit.
Yeah.
Because it knows this is not right, and it knows when it is. And I believe we've come to the end of our hour.
It's right. It feels right.
Mm-hmm. So I am Margaret.
And E.M. Michael.
Mm-hmm. And thank you for listening.
Get ready, Jade. I've got a surprise adventure you're going to love.
Really?